Welcome back to Horrors Worldwide. Today I'm going to explain an American science fiction horror film called The Bride of Frankenstein, released in 1935. Spoilers ahead! Watch out and stay safe. Mary Shelley, the author of Frankenstein, reveals to Percy Shelley and Lord Byron that Henry Frankenstein and his mother did not die and tells them what happened after the fire incident on the hilltop. The mill burns to the ground while peasants from the village cheer and endorse its destruction. To restore order, the village's burgomaster declares the monster dead and encouragingly sends the mob home. Believed to be mortally wounded after being thrown from the burning mill, Dr. Henry Frankenstein lies on a stretcher. When Han, the peasant father of the little girl the monster accidentally drowned, walks over the unstable beams from the wreckage of the fire, he falls through the collapsed door and splashes into an underground. The creature's hand and arm first appear from behind a wooden beam, and then the monster steps fully into view from the shadows. Hans is held under waist-deep water and drowned by the monster. A sleepy-looking owl witnesses the murder. Han's wife reaches into the wreckage for her husband's extended hand, not realizing that she is pulling the monster from the debris. The resurrected monster kills the silly farm wife by heaving her down into the mill and stalks off into the countryside. Soon, the monster comes up behind Frankenstein's hysterical servant, Minnie, who sees him and becomes panicked and crazed at the sight of the monster. Screeching, she turns and runs off in fright, leaving the bewildered monster standing there. News of Henry Frankenstein's demise is brought to Henry's fiancée, Elizabeth, at Castle Frankenstein. After his seemingly lifeless form is carried into the castle on a stretcher, Minnie rushes in and wails to a co-worker that the monster still lives, but she does not believe it. Later in the evening, when Henry is in his bedroom with Elizabeth, they are startled by a loud knocking at the castle door by another mad scientist named Dr. Septimus Pretorius. He introduces his purpose to Minnie, and then he is led up to Henry's bedroom through dark corridors. Pretorius asks Elizabeth to excuse herself from their private conversation. After she exits, Pretorius approaches Henry with an offer to collaborate on a second creation that will better his blasphemous achievements in creating life. Henry is upset and agitated by the proposal and unwilling to comply, and he walks away from Pretorius. But when Pretorius mentions his creations, curiosity drives, and Henry wants to see Pretorius's creation. They are driven by coach to Pretorius's lodgings, where they first drink to their new partnership as monster makers. Then Pretorius hauls a heavy coffin-like box into the room, removes its cover, and begins placing black cloth-covered bell jar containers on a table. Pretorius unveils for Henry several miniature homunculi figures in glass jars. The figures are perfect in shape, but lack size. Pretorius's major challenge was achieving human size for his creatures while using a natural approach. Meanwhile, the monster finds a still, placid pool and scoops up water to quench his thirst in the woods. Seeking friendship, the monster staggers over to a beautiful young shepherdess. When she sights him, she screams, loses her balance on the rock cliff, and plummets into the pool. He follows her into the water and saves her life. Spurning the monster, her terrified screams alert nearby hunters who attack him. For his magnanimity, the monster is shot in the arm and chased through the forest. One of the hunters notifies the burgomaster and other villagers that the monster is on a rampage, and a search is immediately organized. The monster is then captured and tied on the cross and taken into town in a hay cart and shackled into a stone-thrown chair. With his brute superhuman strength, the monster quickly breaks from his chains, kills one of the guards, and escapes into the street. The monster returns to the woods that evening, where he hungrily smells a chicken roasting above a gypsy campfire. He assaults the terrorized family around the fire and burns his hand, reaching to snatch the food. Wandering and blundering around some more, he finally seeks idyllic refuge at the cabin of an old blind hermit. Approaching with a smile and a friendly demeanor, the mute monster stumbles into the blind man's home and is welcomed. Hospitable to his stray dog visitor, the pure-of-heart blind hermit befriends the disturbed creature, becoming his first supportive friend. Later, the hermit teaches the monster a rudimentary vocabulary of simple words, while introducing the creature to simple pleasures like food, smoke, and music. As the monster sits at his teacher's feet, smoking and listening to the violin music, the same two hunters who shot at the monster earlier lose their way in the forest and knock at the hermit's door, discovering the monster inside. The monster throws down one of the threatening hunters as the hermit defends his monster friend. In an ironic question, the hermit learns the monster's true identity from one of the astonished hunters. In a struggle, the hut is accidentally set on fire, and while the monster cowers inside as the flames expand, and the protesting hermit is removed and led away from the hut by the hunters. The monster eventually stumbles through the smoke to the door, and on the run again, the monster enters a surrealistic graveyard. In front of another large, stark crucifix, he steps down into an underground crypt to hide from torch-carrying villagers. Just by coincidence, Pretorius and two ghoulish hired assistants, Carl and Ludwig, enter the mausoleum with lanterns to rob the corpse of a young 19-year-old girl for the madman's life-creating experiments. The monster hides in the dark shadows and watches the proceedings. After stealing, the two assistants leave, but Pretorius remains to have a meal and smoke in the funeral surroundings. Appropriately, the monster staggers up to Pretorius, not frightening him in the least. The grave-robbing, scheming scientist befriends the monster for his own ends, forgetting about his original grave-robbing errand. Later, Pretorius revisits Henry and tells him about the scientist's preparations for the collaborative experiment. Racked with wretched pain and anxiety, Henry changes his mind and refuses to cooperate by backing out of their partnership. To persuade Frankenstein to join in his part of the experiment, Pretorius opens the outer door to the monster, providing a harrowing confrontation between the creature and his creator. The lovesick, fierce-looking monster endorses Pretorius' mad plans of kidnap and extortion, wishing for a female companion. To extort Henry into complying and to force his cooperation, Pretorius orders the monster to kidnap Frankenstein's bride on her wedding day, and then blackmails the entire household. The monster deposits Elizabeth in a dark, mountain cave. Henry admits defeat to Pretorius after being blackmailed into commencing the creation of a bride for the monster. Pretorius promises to return Henry's real bride after the artificial bride has been created. Now the work begins as the two mad scientists resume their experiments, but the human heart that they have procured appears unsound. In return for a payment of 1,000 crowns, Carl is instructed to go to the accidental hospital for a heart from a female victim of sudden death. Unbeknownst to Henry and Pretorius, Carl murders a young peasant girl walking in the street to extract the fresh heart from her bosom. When they test the heart, it beats perfectly just as in life. But Henry is very suspicious about where the transplanted organ came from. As the work continues, exhausted and distraught Henry complains about the glowing monster's presence in the laboratory. No longer needing him, Pretorius callously subdues the impatient monster with more whiskey to prevent him from interfering. The two scientists move a large table of surgical instruments closer toward the corpse. Pretorius removes the sheet covering the bandaged, mummified corpse. Carl is told to proceed to the roof and send up the metal kites to receive the spark of life in the form of a lightning bolt. Sparks fly, smoke plumes rise, arcs of electricity jump between devices, switches are thrown, and a spiraling, circular generator collects and harnesses electrical energy. The gurney with the corpse is sent to the roof. The monster also stalks up to the roof and kills Carl by hurling him from the top of the stone tower, after appearing to be threatened with a lighted torch. After the operating table is lowered back down into the laboratory, and the diffuser bands are removed from the corpse, they see the signs of life. The monster eagerly rushes down into the laboratory to meet his new bride. She stands back warily. In a heartbreaking parody of typical romantic courtships, the monster approaches his bride. The ugly creature's clumsy and ludicrous overtures are rejected and repelled by the unreceptive bride by pulling away and seeking shelter behind her creator, Frankenstein. The monster refuses to stand back and proceeds to sit next to her. He takes her reptilian claw-like hand in his own and caresses it, causing her more horrified distaste and another shrewish shriek. Frankenstein pulls her away from the monster, which hurts him and makes him angry. With a broken, humiliated, and rejected heart, the monster goes berserk, realizing the utter hopelessness of his life and determined to destroy everything around him in a rage. Elizabeth escapes from her bonds and races to the tower door where she pleads for Henry to flee. The monster spares Henry and Elizabeth by permitting them to rush to safety outside. However, he pronounces judgment upon Pretorius' perversity. As the monster reaches for and pulls the fateful lever to bring cloth creatures and the creator to extinction, the bride expels one long, snake-like hiss at him. A tear rolls down the monster's repulsive face as he summons a fatally aborted honeymoon night. Explosions begin to rock the stone tower, and the crumbling foundation buries everyone inside alive. On a nearby hillside, Elizabeth and Henry happily embrace as he offers comforting words to her.